Welcome to This World. My name is Vikram Chandra and I'm here to keep you on top of the week's biggest global developments. So if you haven't had the time to read the news through this week, make sure you stay with us for the next half an hour or so, because this is the show to bring you up to date with all that is happening in this world. The biggest story this week is from Israel. Israel has bombed targets in Gaza and in Lebanon. This after rockets were fired from those areas into Israel. Tensions have erupted once again during the holy month of Ramadan. It began with the Israeli police raiding the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which, as most of you probably know, is the third holiest site in Islam. What followed was the firing of the rockets and then the airstrikes. 2 years ago, there was an actual war that did break out, and from where I'm sitting, it's looking as if we shouldn't rule out the possibility of history repeating itself once again. Also on the show tonight, we're going to be taking a close look at America, where what was once unthought of, unheard of, came to life this week, with former American President Donald Trump being arrested at a New York court. The spectacle played out on live TV. But was the drama a blow to brand Trump, or will the former president use it to carve his way back to the White House? We will discuss that on the show tonight, where we will be joined by Ambassador John Bolton, the former American ambassador to the UN, who is a Republican and someone who believes that Trump could potentially benefit from this. We begin in Israel, which may be on the brink of another war. Israel has been bombing targets in Lebanon and in the Gaza Strip. This after rockets were fired into Israel from both locations. And as always, opinion is sharply polarized on who is to blame for all of this. Israel and its supporters point to the rockets and say that Israel is under attack. But critics of Israel highlight the bombing raids, the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, and also the police raids on Al-Aqsa earlier this week. So to help you get some perspective, let me start by recalling all that's happened this week. On Tuesday, Israeli police stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Why? The answer depends on whom you ask. Israel says that security forces were forced to enter the prayer halls because some masked agitators barricaded themselves inside the mosque. They point to an agreement that worshippers cannot stay inside the mosque overnight during Ramadan. The worshippers, though, tell another story. Soon, videos emerged showing Israeli police beating worshippers inside the mosque. Now, let's just put all of this into perspective. This is where Al-Aqsa is located in Jerusalem's old city. This mosque is the third holiest site in Islam. The compound within which Al-Aqsa is located is incidentally also the most sacred site in Judaism. The Jews call it Temple Mount. This highly sensitive compound is governed by a long-standing status quo, under which only Muslims are allowed to worship inside Al-Aqsa. Non-Muslims only have visiting rights. They can't worship there. Now, Al-Aqsa has been at the heart of numerous clashes over the years, but a clash during the holy month of Ramadan is always likely to spill beyond the compound, as it did in this case too. Protesters took to the streets of Gaza, many burning tires and attacking the police. Others organized a sit-in. Soon after, rockets were fired into Israel from the Gaza Strip. Many of these rockets then intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome. In parts of Israel, the sky lit up, and on the ground, there was fear. Take a look.
Wow, מטורף.
And if you know anything about Israel, it of course was not going to sit idle. The country got its fighter jets airborne and struck strategic targets in Gaza. The Israeli army released this video. An escalation of tension between Israel and Palestine during Ramadan was bound to put the entire neighborhood on high alert. Why, you ask? Well, essentially because of what happened 2 years ago in 2021. A very similar clash at Al-Aqsa during Ramadan triggered a war. It began on the 10th of May. And the ceasefire then only came into effect on the 21st of May. In between, some 256 people died in the Gaza Strip. 14 people died in Israel. Among them, incidentally, was an Indian national. So can the current clash trigger a similar situation? Turkey and Saudi Arabia among the first countries to step forward and condemn the raids, with Riyadh going to the extent of saying the clashes are detrimental to the peace process. But those strong words did not have too much of an impact on the ground, because late on Wednesday night, the Israeli police entered the Al-Aqsa compound once again. Why? To evacuate worshippers, the IDF says. The Israeli police says there were youngsters who'd brought rocks and firecrackers into the mosque, and they had then barricaded themselves. The police reportedly used stun grenades and rubber bullets. And these images of what was happening inside the compound then began to go viral, not just in Israel, not just in the Middle East, but across the world. The worshippers reportedly retaliated by hurling objects at the police. Clashes broke out. The Palestinian Red Crescent says 6 people were injured. The police say 2 of their officers were injured too. And the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pointing the finger at, quote, extremists, unquote. He says the extremists are to be blamed for what happened. But who's really buying Netanyahu's narrative? Well, not too many, to be frank. Protests broke out as far as Turkey, with people gathering outside the Israeli mission out there. And protests in other parts of the Middle East as well. These protests, for example, taking place in Jordan. And then, later in the week, the escalation really began to step up. Rockets being fired again into Israel from Gaza, and then missiles being fired from sites in southern Lebanon. Videos posted on social media showed rockets over northern Israel, accompanied by the sounds of explosions, and the cycle of escalation continued to spiral out of control as the Israeli bombing attacks also moved from the Gaza Strip alone to sites in southern Lebanon. And for more on what's happening in Israel, we're being joined by Lester Munson, who's a senior fellow at the National Security Institute and also principal international of the BGR Group, joining us from Washington. Lester, thank you so much for being with us. Now, I was in Israel just a couple of weeks back, and I don't think anybody was really visualizing an escalation of this nature, especially during Ramadan and with Passover taking place there in Israel. It seems like quite a serious situation.
Right. So it really is, does seem very unfortunate that this confluence of holidays, we've got the Jewish holiday of Passover, the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, overlapping in Jerusalem. And of course, this is on the weekend of Easter, which is a big celebratory time for Christians. Really unfortunate that we're seeing this, these things play out. Some violence happening, a lot of police interventions with folks who are worshiping. There may be other things going on the ground. Some of the reports are a little unclear about exactly what's happening in certain places. But I think hard not to have a sense that this is just really unfortunate that we're seeing this from 3 of the great faiths of humanity can't seem to get along on the ground.
Do you have any thoughts on what the need was to move into Al-Aqsa right now, during Ramadan, during Passover? Was there any specific reason for it? Barricading is what we are hearing. I've also heard other people saying maybe this is some sort of saving of face after what's just happened with the judicial reforms for the Israeli government.
Well, the reports I've seen indicate, and I'm not there, of course, but the reports I've seen indicate that there's some concern among Israeli officials that folks were barricading themselves inside the mosque, and there may have been some implements of violence. I don't know if it was guns or something less serious than that in the mosque, and they wanted to address the situation before it became worse. It's truly unfortunate that folks who may have just been worshiping innocently had that interrupted by this activity. There's no doubt, but I think it's safe to say tensions are very high in Jerusalem right now, and again, to have it happen during these three overlapping holy events is really very unfortunate.
So from the outside, it looks as if Israel is lurching towards a period of instability, divisions even among the Jews, between the secular and the ultra-Orthodox, as we've been seeing for the past few months with the judicial reforms. And just when that seems to be settling down, this could potentially lead to a fresh intifada. It could potentially lead to a fresh war if the signs are whatever they are on the ground.
Well, there's always something happening in Israel and Palestine that I think to outsiders seems to be of great concern. This seems to be a notch or two above the normal activity. So I think, yes, it's right to be concerned. There's no doubt that Israeli politics are in turmoil at the moment, maybe a little bit less turmoil than they were a week ago, but still we're seeing changing Israeli politics. We're seeing the frustrations of the Palestinian people. It's a powder keg on a good day. And now it seems to be even more intense. And then you lay on top of that the tensions with Iran in the region generally, and all of the other external factors on this system. And yes, of course, you have to be worried that it's going to get worse. Let's hope cooler heads prevail. I know U.S. diplomats are working to try and calm the situation. I wish, of course, them the best of luck. And for anyone else who's seeking peace at this time, let us celebrate them.
All right, Lester, thank you so much for joining us with that perspective. Thank you so much. Right, our next story is from the United States of America. This week, America saw one of its former presidents being arrested in broad daylight. And no points for guessing, I'm talking about Donald Trump. The same Donald Trump who walked away from the White House on the 20th of January 2021 with a sore face and without greeting his successor, Joe Biden. Ever since, Trump hasn't really received the kind of press attention that he did all of this week. And no surprises there, because this week, Donald Trump became the first president in the history of the United States to face criminal charges and to be indicted for them. These charges are related to hush money paid to a porn star in 2016 ahead of Trump's election to the White House. These aren't necessarily the most serious charges that Trump is facing, but the first on which he has been indicted and arraigned. On Tuesday, Trump had a dramatic day in court. He flew from Florida to New York the day before. He landed in his private plane, spent the night in Trump Tower, and then the next morning he went to the courtroom. But before leaving for court, Trump posted a note on his social app, and he wrote, and I quote, "Seems so surreal. Wow, they're going to arrest me." He went on to add, "Can't believe this is happening in America. MAGA." MAGA, of course, short for Make America Great Again, which, as all of you remember, is the political slogan that Trump has used for his 2016 campaign and all through his stint in the White House. In a social media post, Trump went on to declare, and I'm quoting here, "The radical left Democrats have criminalized the justice system," unquote. Outside the court stood hundreds of people, many sporting MAGA hats and waving the American flag. Trump waved at them. The scene looked like an election campaign. And honestly, Trump's appearance in court, that he had branded as a kangaroo court, may well turn out to have quite an impact on American politics. You see, Donald Trump is making the most of this media attention. He's using the spotlight to campaign for a second stint in the White House. I don't know if you know this, but Trump has already declared that he is running for office, meaning come 2024, Trump will be seeking the Republican ticket to take on Joe Biden or whoever the Democratic candidate is. Now, what this case does is give Trump the opportunity to energize his support base and also raise funds for his campaign. It is no wonder that the former president is milking the arrest by presenting himself as the victim of a witch hunt and even hinting at a plot by the deep state against him. But how much of this will actually bear fruit and how much of it could actually backfire? Let's not forget, Trump still faces 34 felony charges in this case alone. Of course, he's pleading not guilty to all of them. But then there are other cases coming up, other indictments that could also come up. And all of this may open the door to a legal process that may last for months. Now, you could argue it perfectly coincides with an election campaign. But then there are also chances that things don't go exactly according to plan. And yes, there are those other cases, and it's never fun, I guess, for anybody to be indicted or arraigned in criminal charges, no matter whether you think it's going to help your political campaign or not. But for more on all of this, let's bring in John Bolton. He's served as the National Security Advisor to Trump. He's also served as the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations. Ambassador Bolton, thank you so much for joining us, and it's great to have you talking to us. You, of course, worked closely with Donald Trump in the past. What do you make of these unprecedented scenes that we've seen in the United States? A former president being arrested and indicted and arraigned. What do you make of these scenes that we've seen in the U.S. this week?
Well, certainly it's without precedent. It's not a good day for the United States that this has happened, whatever people's political perspectives might be. But it also indicates, I think, how uncertain the political developments here are going to be leading up to the 2024 election. The irony is that that being indicted has actually helped Trump in the Republican nomination fight for 2024. People think the prosecutor in New York is biased, that it's political, that he's singled Trump out. I personally, speaking as a lawyer myself, I think the indictment is very weak on a number of grounds that may make it different from some of the other criminal investigations that are now underway, and they have yet to come to a resolution. But from my perspective of not wanting Trump to be the Republican nominee, ironically, as I say, the indictment is harmful to that effort because it helps Trump.
Ambassador Bolton, so when you're saying that this particular indictment is on relatively weak grounds, I have heard from many people who are not Trump supporters, who don't want Trump to be the Republican candidate, saying this indictment is potentially one of the weakest, and maybe it would have been better if one of the other cases that he's facing indictment on would have actually come up. Now, that's one point of view. It could also be argued that no matter who you are, what you have done, if you've done something that is potentially a criminal act, then you should be facing the due process of law.
Well, it's a very important point that there's one law that applies to every citizen, no matter what their position. The problem here is Trump has been able to make the argument that this is a political prosecution and that he's being singled out unfairly. And when the indictment itself is very weak, it plays into that line of argument. Now, the real test, of course, will be whether he is acquitted or whether he is convicted. If he's acquitted, in this particular case, then that would add to his argument that it was all politically motivated. If he's convicted, I think it's a very different outcome politically as well as legally. And I think that also applies to the other pending investigations, the accusation of trying to steal the election in Georgia and the two federal elections, one dealing with January 6th, one dealing with the classified documents.
And this particular case is, of course, somewhat muddled because at the same time as you're having this indictment, you've had Stormy Daniels losing a defamation case to Trump, having to pay Trump a certain amount of money. Would you say, Ambassador Bolton, that the entire political dynamics could change if he also gets indicted in some of the other cases? So it's not just this one case, but the other cases also come up.
Well, I think obviously you have to see what the indictments turn out to be, but the argument that he tried to persuade Georgia election officials in 2020 to make up votes to allow him to win the state and win Georgia's electors is a very serious challenge. This is not the tawdry issue of paying hush money to a porn star to cover up an extramarital affair. This is something that does go directly to the integrity of the electoral process. But there again, the indictment would only be the beginning of the case. And the question there would be, again, is he acquitted or is he convicted? An acquittal, if you begin to build up a string of acquittals, then it really does strengthen the Trump position, at least as far as getting the Republican nomination, which is why, again, many Republicans believe that Donald Trump is the Democrats' best asset. So of all the potential Republican candidates, the Democrats would rather face Trump, whereas these indictments, this alleged persecution, builds up his chances to get the Republican nomination, but makes it easier for the Democrats to beat him in the general election.
Thank you so much for being with us with that perspective. Well, let's get another point of view on that entire story. I'm now being joined by John Christopher Weir, who's a political analyst and a White House commentator, joining us from there. Thank you so much, Weir, for being with us. We were just hearing from John Bolton about how he thought that paradoxically this could end up being a good week for Donald Trump, something which happened which could potentially benefit him in the run-up to 2024. What's your own perspective on that?
It's never a good thing to be a criminal defendant. It's never a good thing to be exposed. It's never a good thing for someone who I've known for 30 years to be exposed as giving hush money to porn stars and to Playboy girls and to keeping people quiet. It's called paying hush money. He had an elaborate scheme that involved his lawyer, Michael Cohen, actually paid the porn star on his behalf, and he took the money from his business and he called it a business expense as he gave money to quiet these people. And that's problematic for Mr. Trump. He'll try to get away with it. He's tried to get away with everything. He said the entire election was a fake. He said it even before November, and it was a fake. It's fake news. But you know the roosters have come home to roost, and we have a very, very powerful Manhattan DA called Alvin Bragg, and a very powerful judge too, who was used to mob style criminals and white collar and violent criminals. So they're ready for it.
There are cases and cases, and as you were just discussing, some of the other cases could be stronger than this particular case, and therefore Trump may potentially benefit from the political impact. Although, having said that, you're right, it's not a good thing to be a criminal defendant, and potentially a criminal defendant in 4 cases that are going to be coming up and taking up a lot of his time.
Well, if you were running a campaign, would you want to be indicted? Would you want to have to deal with a defamation case from a woman who he supposedly abused and raped in a very elegant department store in Manhattan, and he has to put up with that? He has the criminal act of trying to influence the election in Georgia. And he's got that individual coming after him, Fannie Wallace. And we have other stories and others, including January 6th, where he was promoting illegalities. Now, he is not above the law. Having this detail will come out. And the key is that this is a indictment that is very serious, especially in New York, because if you declare something as a business expense, you're taking your taxes. And the IRS and the New York State, you know this, New York State tax folks do not like when someone declares something a business expense and then takes it off his tax returns.
All right, John, thank you so much for joining us with that view. And that's all we have for you this week, but we will see you again with a fresh lineup of stories and the big newsmakers next week. My name is Vikram Chandra, and you're watching This World on WION World is One.